Hello everybody and welcome to today's video, an updated guide to AQA English Literature Paper 1 Section A, focusing on an example based on Macbeth because I know that's the play that most of you are studying. Paper 1 Section A assesses your knowledge of a Shakespeare play and your teacher will select the text you're studying from the following list. The total exam length is 1 hour 45 minutes and the paper is marked out of 64. 34 marks are available for Section A, the Shakespeare section, including 4 marks for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. 30 marks are available for Section B, the 19th century novel question, and we'll look at that in a later video. You should spend around 55 minutes on the Shakespeare question, including 5 minutes to check your technical accuracy at the end. This is a closed book examination, which means you're not allowed to take copies of your texts in with you. There will, however, be an extract provided in the question paper for you to analyse. The assessment objectives in this section are AO1, read, understand and respond to texts. Students should be able to maintain a critical style and develop an informed personal response, and use textual references, including quotations, to support and illustrate interpretations. AO2, analyse the language, form and structure used by a writer to create meanings and effects, using relevant subject terminology where appropriate. AO3, show understanding of the relationships between texts and the contexts in which they were written. And AO4, use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with accurate spelling and punctuation. Now let's start with a quick guide to what each of these means, with examples based on a Macbeth question. AO1 is all about response to task and text using supporting references. It goes without saying that you need to know your play inside out. Yes, you'll be provided with an extract in the exam, but the question will ask you to explore how something is presented across the text, including the extract. So obviously, you'll need to know the text well to answer the question. The most important thing about this exam, and in fact both literature exams, is the idea of response to task, i.e. answering the question. This came up again in the 2023 exam report. Your number one priority in the literature exams is to answer the questions. Now that might sound obvious, but time and time again in past exams, what we've seen is a number of students who know something very clever about a text and want to force that into their answer no matter what the question is. Don't let that be you. Priority number one needs to be to answer the question. The highest marks are awarded to students who have a conceptualised response, a hypothesis, a line of argument which is explored throughout your answer. Rather than an answer made up of random, disjointed paragraphs and ideas, a conceptualised response has one clear line of argument all the way through. Let's look at an example with a question based on Macbeth, and you can find this question along with a full answer in the second edition of my guide to English literature, which is linked in the description. Read the following extract from Act 1, Scene 3 of Macbeth and then answer the question that follows. You can pause the video if you want to read through the extract there. Starting with the extract, explore how far Shakespeare presents the witches as powerful in the extract and the play as a whole. The summer 2017 exam report for this exam stated, and this is a paraphrase, I'll link the original in the description, there isn't a fixed format for responding to the questions. However, high quality answers often started by addressing the main theme of the question using the entire text, and then dipped in and out of both the extract and the whole text throughout their answer. This demonstrated a robust and assured understanding of the text and its concepts. Now I don't know about you, but if something often appears in high mark answers, I want to do that. So let's think about the question in terms of the whole text. However, this comes with a warning. You must write about the extract and the wider text. So even though you're thinking about the whole text, don't forget to include the extract in your answer. So in other words, how far does Shakespeare present the witches as powerful in the entire play? Now in some ways, a question on the witches is limited because they only appear a handful of times, so with these more minor characters we can actually think about every single appearance they make. Now firstly then, there's the way the play opens with the witches finishing up their meeting on the heath in Act 1 Scene 1, then they meet Macbeth and Banquo in Act 1 Scene 3, giving them both prophecies. So within the first 3 scenes we meet the witches twice. But then things change. We don't see the witches again until Act 3, Scene 5, in a kind of bizarre scene that many experts don't even believe Shakespeare wrote, and then they make their final appearance in Act 4, Scene 1, when Macbeth visits them one last time. And when we think about the whole text then, a bigger picture perhaps starts to emerge, a picture where the witches seem powerful at the start of the play, and certainly seem powerful to Macbeth when he interacts with them, but actually this sense of power is undermined by Shakespeare and diminishes as the play progresses to the point where the witches fade out way before the end of the text. So with all that in mind, I'm going to come up with my thesis statement for the answer, and I think something like this would work. While Shakespeare initially presents the witches as powerful, ultimately this impression of power is illusory, used by the playwright to explore the theme of appearances versus reality. And here we have a concept, in this case a two-part line of argument, and I'm going to perhaps spend the first half of my answer looking at the witches as powerful, and the second half looking at how this is just an illusion. Everything in my answer then becomes part of the theory I'm exploring. And whilst we're here, what about this as an introduction? Lots of you ask me, do I need to write an introduction? And this point has come up in a number of past exam reports, including the 2023 one. Starting your answer with something like this, which makes your conceptualized idea, your thesis, your line of argument clear, is a good idea. It makes it very clear right away to the examiner where you're going to go with the answer, but, and this is important, it also helps you as a student because you can keep looking back at it to make sure you're not drifting off the question, which, as you remember, is priority number 1, answer the question. Now, the next part of AO1 is about supporting references. Exam reports have pointed out time and time again that this can be a quotation from the text, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a reference to something that happens, a paraphrase, or a direct quotation. You don't have the text in the exam, so you aren't expected to have memorized everything, which is encouraging. So for example, when I write about how the audience already knew about Macbeth's promotion, I don't have to give the exact quotation from Duncan. I can just reference the moment and write something like, the audience already know about Macbeth's promotion as Duncan spoke about it in the previous scene. But if I want to make a specific language analysis point, perhaps how Macbeth, so foul and fair a day I have not seen, echoes the witches fair is foul and foul is fair from a couple of scenes previously, then direct quotations might work better there because they're the crux of the point. Now AO2 is an interesting one. Assessment objectives are set by Ofqual and are the same across all GCSE English literature specifications, no matter what exam board you're on here in the UK, and the actual assessment objective is analyse language, form and structure. And up until the 2022 exams, the AQA mark scheme explicitly listed an analysis of language and form and structure in the top band. But now there's been a helpful tweak to the mark schemes, which refer more broadly to analysis of writers' methods. So what's happened here? Well, a couple of things. Firstly, it comes back to the point I've already made, that your primary objective in these exams is answering the question. AQA don't want anyone to feel that they have to include, let's say, a paragraph on structure or a paragraph on form. It's absolutely fine to do that, but, and here's the big important point, only if it actually adds something useful to your analysis in answering the question. And that won't always be the case. The expansion of the mark scheme is there to help you understand you don't have to write about any specific method. It's all about bringing relevant methods into your answer. Of course, the assessment objective remains AO2, language, structure and form, so it's never wrong to study these areas, but when we're in an exam we should think first and foremost about answering the question and bring in anything relevant to our answer. And the key word is relevant. If it's a method the writer has used and it's relevant to your answer, then you can write about it. If there were ever some things that you weren't sure fit neatly into this assessment objective, like perhaps setting or characterization, you don't need to worry. If it's relevant to the question, you can write about it. So let's look at some of the things to do with AO2, but remember this is not an exhaustive list. If there's a method used by Shakespeare and it's relevant to your answer, you can include it in your response. But with that in mind, let's think about the three main parts of AO2. Language is all about Shakespeare's use of words, phrases, and language features for effect. Now this includes figurative language, such as similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, that kind of thing, but it is wider than that too. One way I like to look at language analysis is to ask, where has Shakespeare used a word or phrase where another one would have been fine, but he seems to have chosen that one for a specific effect? Structure is about how the text is organised, the order things take place in. Structure analysis is less about what's happening in a text and more about where it's happening and why. In the Shakespeare question, it's really useful to ask yourself, where does the extract come from in the wider text, and how is that relevant to the question I'm being asked? Now, there are different ways of approaching this. You might want to learn some theories on whole text structure, but you don't need to. At the very least, you can ask yourself, what happens before and after the extract, and how is that important? Now, for whole text structure, I like to teach Freytag's pyramid, which can be applied to both 5-act plays and novels. It runs from left to right, starting with the exposition where we're introduced to the main characters and setting. Then there's the inciting incident, the trigger or catalyst, which builds up to the climax, the moment of greatest tension in the play, and then the winding down to the end. And we can apply this, for example, to Shakespeare's plays. Here's Freytag's pyramid for Macbeth. Now, how can we use this knowledge in the exam? Well, in our question about the presentation of the witches as powerful, the extract we have, the first time the witches meet Macbeth, is the inciting incident in the tragedy. It's the catalyst or trigger that makes everything else unfold. And this suggests the witches are powerful, as they play such a key role in the tragedy. So thinking about where the extract comes from in the wider text is one way to think about structure. The 2017 summer exam report highlighted, and again this is a paraphrase, the original's linked in the description, that in the Shakespeare section, students who consider the positioning of the extract within the play are inherently addressing the playwright's methods. And the same report stated that higher performing students skillfully discussed the location of the extract in the text and then leveraged this to delve into character progression. Now, as I said, you don't have to do that through learning structural theories like Freytag. You might just want to think about what happens before and after the extract. Let's look at an example. In Act 1, Scene 3, the witches tell Macbeth he will be, among other things, Thane of Cawdor. Moments later, Ross arrives and tells Macbeth he's been promoted to that very role, and this astonishes Macbeth. Now, as Dr. Emma Smith explains, the witches seem creepily omnipotent to Macbeth, the gap between prophecy and enactment frighteningly slender, but to us, that is actually a gap between command, the king's words in Act 1, Scene 2, and fulfilment. To Smith, the witches seem to interpose in a chain of human actions rather than direct actions themselves. Now, this is such an important point. For Macbeth, Ross's words are the first he's heard of his promotion to Thane of Cawdor, so he's blown away by the witches' apparent power. However, for us, the audience, we don't feel the same way. Why? Because of Shakespeare's use of dramatic irony. That's where the audience knows something the characters on stage do not. In the previous scene, Act 1, Scene 2, we've already seen this moment where Duncan explains he's going to promote Macbeth to Thane of Cawdor, saying, "No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest, go pronounce his present death, and with his former title greet Macbeth." The brilliance of Shakespeare's structural decision lies not only in the creation of dramatic irony, but also in prompting deeper questions that tie in with the major themes of the play, of appearances versus reality. What Macbeth sees is not what we see. It's very clever. And we can think more about the whole text structure too. Shakespeare's decision to open the play with the witches suggests they'll take a significant role, but his decision to end their role so early in the play, in Act 4, Scene 1, perhaps questions or undermines that. Another way to look at structure is within the extract itself, and this is similar to the kinds of things you're looking at in Paper 1 Question 3 for English Language on AQA. So looking again at the extract, what might we pick out? The structural sequence of the witches' prophecies, moving from what Macbeth and the audience knows, that's Thane of Glamis, to what the audience knows but Macbeth doesn't, Thane of Cawdor, to what has not yet happened but will, becoming king, suggests power as it moves from what is proven to what is predicted, from what is known to what is unknown. But as always, we only write about this if we can make it relevant to the question. There's no benefit to showing off your knowledge of structure or Freytag or anything like that unless it is relevant to your answer. Form means the type of text you're studying. So in Section A, a play, where we have an audience, not a reader. In a play, you might think about the use of stage directions to suggest aspects of a character's behaviour, and considering how things will appear on stage, paying close attention to stage directions will help here. Also think about how things would look and sound on the stage. So the witches speak in trochaic metre. Well, when we read the words on the page, the difference perhaps doesn't stand out, but the trochaic metre of the witches' speech would make them sound notably different to all of the other characters who speak in prose or iambic pentameter if we were watching and listening to the play. So this auditory difference further sets the witches apart and perhaps amplifies their mysterious sense of power. AO3 is context. The term can be understood in a variety of ways and will vary depending upon which text you're studying. Context can mean when the text was written, when and where it's set, the literary context and genre, or responses from different audiences. So actually, by writing about Macbeth as tragedy, we'd be hitting AO3 in terms of genre. But context also links to the wider themes in a text, and a helpful piece of advice from the exam board is that the questions will always be worded in such a way that they have a link to context in them. Once again, answering the question is key. If you answer the question fully, you'll be addressing context. To gain full marks for AO4, you should achieve consistent accuracy in spelling and punctuation, and you must also use sentence structures and vocabulary to clearly express meaning. So giving yourself a few minutes at the end to check through your answer for these things will be helpful. That extra mark or two could be the difference between one grade and the next. So let's recap the points from this video, think about the question in relation to the whole text, including the extract, and come up with the theory or line of argument or concept that you will explore throughout your answer. Bring in any methods that are relevant to your answer and keep looking back at the question and your introduction to make sure you're not drifting off topic. Because this is an extract-based question, think about where the extract is from in the wider text and consider how that's relevant, and consider if that is relevant to your question. I hope you found this video useful. If you'd like to read a full answer to this question, you can find that in the second edition of my guide to English literature, which I've just updated. It's linked in the description. You can get it in paperback on Amazon or instant download ebook at mrbruff.com. But if you found the video useful and want more in this series on the other sections of the exam, then please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.